this IALIC of IALIC 2021 conference. It is my pleasure and my privilege to introduce Dr. Anne-Marie Truscott de Mejia, who is a very well-known person in Colombia, but also internationally due to the important amount of books, the important number of books she has published. Dr. Anne-Marie Truscott de Mejia is a full professor, and she has worked at the School of Language Sciences at Universidad del Valle, and then at the School of Education at Universidad de los Andes in Bogotá, Colombia, as the director of the PhD program in education and director of the research group Education for Bilingualism and Multilingualism. She holds a PhD in linguistics in the area of bilingual education from Lancaster University in the UK, and her research interests include bilingual classroom interaction, language and education policy, interculturality, and bilingual teacher development. She has published in the area of bilingualism and bilingual education, both in Spanish and English. And her latest publications include Forging Multilingual Spaces, 2008, Empowering Teachers Across Cultures, 2011, with Christine Elot, Immersion Education in the Early Years, 2016, co-edited with Tina Heke, as well as Bilingualismo en el Contexto Colombiano, 2011, co-edited with Alexis López and Beatriz Peña Dix, and Empoderamiento, Autonomía y Pensamiento Crítico en las Aulas de Lenguas Extranjeras, 2016, again with Beatriz Peña Dix and Nicole Braskevitz. She's also co-editor of Interculturalidad y Formación de Profesores, 2019, with Beatriz Peña Dix and Isabel Tejada Sánchez. So, Anne-Marie, the floor is yours, and I'm sure we're going to enjoy a wonderful lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria Jose, for that introduction. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening in some cases. I understand there's quite a wide time zone today. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really relieved because we had some difficulties with the internet, but now, thanks to the committee, everything is solved. Hopefully there will be no problems today. And I'm interested in sharing some ideas with you on this interesting topic, which we have been working on for the last few years, interculturality in language teaching and learning. And I've called this presentation Teaching Language is Not Enough, towards the recognition of intercultural sensitivity in bilingual teaching and learning. Next, Beatrice. Okay, I want to start off on a rather light note. This is something that Beatrice sent me some time ago, and I think it illustrates in some way the possible opportunities for cross-cultural misunderstandings. So if you look at the first couple here, you can see who I interpret as a Japanese businessman offering his business card to this other man and bowing very reverently, and the other man not knowing what to do, not knowing how he should proceed. In the second couple, we have a woman who is obviously going towards the other man, and he feels that she's invading his personal space, whereas she interprets this as being unfriendly. And the man at the end says, what do I do? So this is just rather a light way of starting looking at possible ways, possible cross-cultural conflicts. Okay, Beatrice? Beatrice? Okay, so what I would like to do today is to share with you some different visions of interculturality in language teaching and learning, particularly related to Colombia, but not entirely. And I hope this will complement a little bit what Jose Jose Aldemar said on Monday, as he talked mostly about indigenous contexts, and I'm going to talk about foreign language contexts in Colombia. I will also refer to diversity, stereotypes, and the other or an other, as Rico says. And I will talk in more detail about sensitizing language teachers to intercultural understanding, looking at a couple of projects and finally an international project we carried out a couple of years ago. I will briefly refer to global citizenship and then also present with you to you a MOOC promoting intercultural awareness. Okay. Right, as I said in my abstract, there is a need for an intercultural perspective, and I think this conference, ratifies this. There are very strong forces in play, creating economic, social, cultural, ecological tensions among individuals and nations. So, as we know, increasingly we live in a very complex, interconnected world. And increasingly, languages and intercultural relationships are seen as hybrid and fluid. And therefore, as Laïs says, we need to think of an education which takes into account the increasingly mobile, plural human being needing to be bi or multilingual. And I remember that Prue Holmes in her introduction talked about increased mobility in relation to immigration, etc. Yeah, okay. Right, and Jose Aldemar, who's in a publication in Press, again refers to ethnic mobility again, and the new socio-democratic dynamics of super diversity, i.e. Blomet, have had a great impact on schools and universities in Colombia. I'm sure not only in Colombia, but he's talking about Colombia. And one thing he said, which is quite interesting as well, another thing, is that foreign languages and second language education is inherently endowed with the potential to engage students in trans-semiotic practices, that these practices invite them to recognize the intercultural nature of the interaction. So he sees this as an inherent possibility, an inherent potential, as we as teachers need to exploit. Thank you. Okay, so my question that I would formulate here is, how can we help different actors in bi and multilingual educational processes, particularly teachers and students, to understand and experience intercultural relationships and to move, as Lidicott and Scarino recommend, from recognition, to the development of practice, because as we will see, there are a lot of lip services being paid to, yes, it's really important, intercultural relationships, intercultural understanding, but how do we do it in the classroom? Okay. Now, there's something that I just wanted to share with you again that Claire Cramps, you know very well, and she's also, tomorrow she's going to be talking to us. So she talked about some of the challenges involved in language and intercultural learning. And perhaps we don't always realize how much our students are challenged in this way. Learning a new language, she says, is taking risks by placing oneself in a position of uncommon subordination and powerlessness. And Giorgio also says it entails sounding less intelligent than in one's mother tongue and learning new socialization patterns of another culture at the risk of acting the wrong way. So this is just, we perhaps don't realize how far, especially adult students, are challenged by sounding less intelligent than they normally would do in Colombia, say in Spanish, trying to use English. So this is another very important factor to take in mind. Bear in mind that these challenges of acting the wrong way in intercultural terms. Okay. Can we change, Beatriz?
Beatriz? Yes, give me one sec. Yes, I'm here. It's It's not moving. Give me 1 sec.
Okay, will do.
Yes, I think that's it. Yes.
Okay, so if we go back to Mike Byram, who is obviously the pioneer of interculturality, intercultural competence, especially in foreign language and second language studies. And in 2002, he, with other people, said that the aim of the intercultural dimension is to develop learners as intercultural speakers or mediators. So notice this idea of working between here, able to engage with complexity and multiple identities. Again, this is the idea that we're going to go and talk a bit about stereotypes and contrasting the idea of these stereotypes, which are very prevalent, with the complexity and multiple identities that bilingual and multilingual speakers develop. So we are able to avoid the stereotyping, perceiving somebody through a single identity, and we are able to perceive the interlocutor as an individual with qualities to be discovered, not a representative of an externally ascribed identity. So notice in these formulations, in these descriptions, Byram and et al. Are really looking at the intercultural dimension in relation, or the in relation to personal individuals. Now, if we go on to the next slide, we can see a rather different vision from Catherine Walsh, who has been referred to in this conference several times. So, as you know, Catherine Walsh, you may know, works in Ecuador, and she talks about 3 visions of interculturality. So she talks about a relational vision, how cultures and values interconnect. A functional view promotes inclusion and dialogical relations among majority and minority cultures. And what she stresses very strongly, a critical perspective, which questions the asymmetric power relations exercised by larger structures of society within which cultural and racial status plays a key role. So very much now societal vision, and we've heard from various speakers about the importance of a critical perspective, especially from a Latin American point of view, okay? So she again refers, as Jose Aldemar has referred to the struggle of indigenous communities. And she says that critical interculturality in Latin America is related to a pedagogical endeavor concerned with making visible these inequitable relations which have developed since colonial times and which have become normalized in the life of the region. And I think with the presentation of Carlos Rico and Tatiana Hoyos yesterday, they very much talked about some of these ideas. Walsh says too, the other is represented as a way to depict a myriad of epistemic possibilities that challenge dominant norms. The Ministry of Education talks about, in Peru, talks about a dialogue, construction of a dialogue between different visions, understandings and practices in order to create societies which are more just. So this is much more centered on the societal vision in Latin America, resistance to colonialism, decoloniality, as we've heard. Okay, and I'm going to cite Carlos Granados, who's another Colombian researcher who's written on the importance of including a decolonial perspective. And he has criticized some of the early formulations of intercultural communicative competence relating to knowledge, attitude, cognition, and political awareness. I realize that recently there have been more development of these ideas, although he says, yes, these are commendable goals, but perhaps due to their origin in North America and Europe, they seem to serve functional interculturality described by Walsh. So he says that the focus on recognition conceals the source and maintenance of equalities existing in subaltern regions such as Latin America, sustained by historical and social factors. So we go again to the importance of resistance to these colonial perspectives. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to share with you, Carlos Rico and Tatiana Hoyos yesterday talked about intercultural discourse hiding sometimes intention of what is really beneath these formulations. And I'm going to refer to two visions of interculturality, official visions in Colombia. The first one comes from a decree in '95, quite a while ago, to do with ethno-education. Now, if you know anything about Colombia ministerial politics or ministerial projections, you will know that there is one set of rules and regulations and decrees for the indigenous communities, the Creole-speaking communities, and these are together under ethno-education. There's another set of laws and decrees and understandings to do with bilingual education, or the national program for bilingual Colombia, which is to do with foreign or international languages. And normally in ethno-education, this comes under the Ministry of Culture, and sometimes under the Ministry of Education, and also, but the foreign language or the second language comes under the Ministry of Education. So they are divided in the ministries as well as in the way they look at, for example, in interculturality. So this sums up what they say about what the ministry says about interculturality. It's understood as the capacity to know one's own culture and other cultures which interact and enrich each other in a dynamic and reciprocal fashion, contributing to construct a coexistence in equality of conditions and mutual respect in social reality. Well, I don't think anybody would object to that, but you have the feeling very often, and knowing Colombian situation, that maybe this discourse hides the idea of resistance, hides the idea of decoloniality. This is like a wish fulfillment, which would be lovely if it worked. Interaction and enriching each other in a dynamic and reciprocal fashion. However, you'll be interested to know that the indigenous communities themselves have, in fact, many of them have turned their back on the ethno-education dynamics, the ethno-education vision of Colombia, and they have started, or a while ago, they've started promoting educación propia, or their own education, in which the communities have much more control over their own education system. So again, this is in a conflict situation a little with between ethno-education and the indigenous vision. Oh, sorry, Beatriz. Now, this is in the ELT, and you can see how there's a different focus here. The world today is characterized by intercultural communication, by the increasing rhythm of scientific and technological advances, and by the processes of internationalization. These circumstances lead to the need for a common language, which allows international society access to this new globalized world. So very much notice we've got scientific and technological advances, internationalization, which has been mentioned in this conference a lot, and also the idea of a new globalized world, globalization. And what is the common language? Well, in Colombia, it's more often than not English. It can be French, sometimes it can be other languages, but 99.9% it is English. Okay, Beatriz. Okay, and one of the researchers we worked on in the project I'm going to share with you a bit later on in Paris, she's Colombian, but she works in Paris, Paola Gamboa Diaz, has agreed with many other researchers that it's important to highlight the complexity of interculturality, and she has coined the term intercultural dimensions, and she sees these as responding to a wide range of critical, epistemological, methodological, pedagogical, and societal concerns, which are chosen and studied according to one's interests or needs. So notice, okay, so she is offering these different perspectives, and she is saying, well, you can look at these from these different, you can look at interculturality or intercultural dimensions from one or other of these concerns. Okay, thank you. Right, now I want to share with you something. We've talked about intercultural competence from Byron, which you know, is very well known, justly, and not too long ago, a 3 or 4 years ago, we found out about, or we hadn't known before, the Bennett's model of intercultural sensitivity, which called our attention because the word of sensitivity in relation to competence. So Bennett originally started this idea, founded this idea in '93, but also has written about it more recently in 2017. So this is interesting in a way because he talks about, it's a 6-stage model, and he talks about 3 ethnocentric stages and then 3 ethno-relative stages. So he starts off by saying, okay, very often people begin with denial. There's a lack of distinction of cultural difference. Then he says, well, the next stage is defense. So difference is distinguished by being either better or worse. So, you know, my culture is better than yours, or your culture is worse than mine. Okay, so difference is better or worse. And then he says in this 3rd ethnocentric stage, differences are dismissed instead of recognizing similarities. So it's a minimization stage. So these are 3 very important stages, he says, in the development of intercultural sensitivity. Now we're going to look at the other 3, which are ethno-relative stages. Beatrice. Right, and he says that these, in these ethno-relative stages, recognition of one's own personal culture as being one among other equally valid options. So acceptance, okay, there is my culture or my cultural practices or my cultural understandings, and these are equally valid with others. Then he said, then he goes on, the next stage would be the recognition of the need to make cognitive and behavioral adjustments, which he calls adaptation. And the final stage, he talks about a multi-dimensional self-concept, based on a multiplicity of worldviews. So you can see the idea from one's own personal cultures being valid, equally valid, how we have to adjust, and then the idea of a multi-dimensional self-concept, which takes into account multiplicity of worldviews. You may say, yes, it sounds very interesting. However, there have been criticisms. Let's look at the next slide. Beatrice. Yes, recently Hoff and Fielding in Australia have criticized models of the development of intercultural competence or sensitivity as problematic, because what they see is limited and reductionist stance. So, you know, 1, 2, for example, with Bennett, you know, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. However, I think if these sequences are not seen as taxative, but as a possible developmental process, this could illustrate tendencies in the growing awareness of intercultural sensitivity rather than a set of rigid stages. So we feel that it is valid to look at it in this way, but not to perhaps to take it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which really, or 6, as Hoff and Fielding have said, this is, rather problematic, seeing it in this way. Right, thank you. Okay, and then before we get on to some of the studies I'm going to share with you, I want to also pick up this concept of diversity and difference, or the two concepts. I think sometimes we tend to treat them as synonyms, difference equals diversity. However, Carlos Rico and Tatiana Hoyos yesterday talked about how to negotiate and accept divergence and different diversity in cultures and identities. And Abdallah Pretsey, a French researcher, in fact says to us, no, we mustn't equate diversity and difference, because she says interculturality involves distinguishing between these two, between diversity and difference. Why? Because difference legitimizes distance, even rejection. So if we're concentrating on difference, we're concentrating on how distant your ideas or your cultural assumptions or understandings are from mine, and even rejecting this. So as Aguada Odina, another researcher, says, diversity has to do with acknowledging the other and acknowledging other ways of seeing the world, yes. And she says, well, cultural diversity is a fact. Heterogeneity is the norm. And we heard yesterday that Sarate says that diversity becomes the greatest wealth of the human condition. So I just wanted to share that with you, because very often we say, oh, diversity, difference, but no, we need to think very carefully. If we're talking about diversity, we're not necessarily referring to the distance or rejection that difference implies, according to Abdallah Pretsey. Thank you. Okay, and Jose Aldemar also says, again, the idea that we started with, foreign second language education is inherently endowed with the potential to engage students in trans-semiotic practices that invite them to recognize the intercultural nature of their interactions, and recognition, develop critical awareness and recognition of the multiple manifestations of diversity, along with the intersecting privileges and oppressions that shape their lives. An interesting idea there. And Carlos and Tatiana said yesterday that we must see teachers and students as intercultural agents. So the idea of agency, of empowering teachers and students in this very important task of being intercultural agents, and not just understanding what it means. Right. Okay, so I'm going to talk now about two recent initiatives in Colombia in the public school sector. I come from a country, England, which talks about the state school sector, but in Colombia we talk about the public school sector. So this is what it means. And this is one a Master in Education research project carried out by Prieto Galindo and Salamanca Molano. And it's talking about teachers' beliefs about the teaching of culture in in English as a foreign language in a public school in Bogotá. And this evidences that teachers tend to concentrate on surface culture, on traditions, on celebrations, on clothing, a little bit what I've forgotten his name. Let me see if I've got it here written down. Joshua Fishman said many years ago, the singing and dancing routines associated with culture. So this is what the researcher says. En el colegio se enfoca uno en gramática por la cantidad de estudiantes. So this is the reason why grammar is highlighted, because there are usually 40 or more students in the class, and they the teachers can't see how they're going to talk about or help the students to become more interculturally aware. And not a surprising conclusion, the English teachers were more concerned about the accountability of linguistic competence, so teaching grammar and exercises from the curriculum textbook, than in trying to develop intercultural understanding. I think this is perfectly understandable, considering some of the difficulties that teachers in the public sector work under and how they try to do their best to help the students present the final exam in grade 11, which means that they will be able, depending on their scores, whether they will be able to go into higher education or not. So intercultural understanding as yet is not a key aspect of these final exams in grade 11. Okay. Now, another study that some of you will know very well comes from Beatrice's study, Developing Intercultural Competence in English Language Teachers Towards Building Intercultural Language Education in Colombia. This was her dissertation supervisor, her PhD supervisor was Prue Holmes, so there's a really nice connection here. And Beatrice wanted to determine whether teachers in public schools in Bogotá, similar situation, include cultural elements in their classes and how and what they think about it. So Beatrice says that there is a need, and it's obvious in many studies too, other studies, to transform language education in Colombia and move forward from the cultural turn to the intercultural turn. And she noted in her thesis that the teachers were very much preoccupied or very much concerned with inner circle Anglo-speaking culture teaching and cross-cultural perspectives, and they rarely orientated their classroom objectives to achieve critical cultural analysis. So it's very much Anglo, what's happening, in the United States, in Britain and Australia, rather than a critical cultural analysis. And she came up with I think, a very balanced conclusion. She said that English teachers feel positively disposed to intercultural competence, English language teaching, but their approaches to culture are mainly essentialist and nationalist. So you can see in those two studies how there's a long way to go in Colombia, and I imagine in other parts of the world, in the idea of how to develop intercultural understanding, intercultural competence, as these essentialist and national ideas are so strongly embedded. Okay. Okay, now I'd like to just for a minute go on to a couple of international perspectives on foreign language teaching and learning and interculturality. And there's an interesting article by Cramsch and Hofmeister in 2015. And they talk about how the expectations of foreign language teachers have been changed. The expectation of foreign language students have been changed because of globalization, and they now see how they will be able to use their languages differently. And Cramsch and Hofmeister also say this has led to great challenges to teachers, especially those who are accustomed to teach from a monolingual or monocultural standpoint. Okay, so now the world is changing, globalization is very much on the cards. Okay, so teachers who have perhaps adopted a more monolingual and monocultural standpoint are now a little bit worried about how they're going to go forward. Oh, Lord. Beatrice? Sorry about that. So Cramsch and Hofmeister recommend a pedagogy focused on fluid relationships between different ways of meaning making, in which we can help students' awareness of the meaning making processes at work in the construction of social and cultural experiences, including the surreptitious use of stereotypes. Now you might say, what is a surreptitious use of stereotypes? Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about stereotypes now, and I'm going to present something which is not at all surreptitious, but I'm going to share with you in the next slides some ideas on stereotypes. Now, this was a study carried out by a student of mine a long time ago in Cali, and what he wanted to do was to find out what students in grade 5 thought about various groups of people, for example, British people. The grade 5 would be about 10 or 11 years old, so you can understand some of their views. Now, what they thought about British people were old-fashioned, polite, formal, sophisticated, and known for tea. So this was us. We were categorized like this. The US, people from the US, Beatriz. Was seen as superficial, artificial, happy, talkative, overweight, egocentric, open, relaxed, and cool. So there you are. You see a balance of sort of positive and negative. And I was quite surprised when they talked about Colombian culture that it was fairly negative, their own culture. So let's look at what they thought about Colombian culture. Too friendly, exaggerated, heavy drinkers, cool, irresponsible, but happy. So notice how these young children have quite clear ideas on how, well, in that study, on how they saw foreigners and also Colombians. Right. Okay, this is what Byram says. It's that he said in '97 that oversimplifying intercultural competence leads to trivialization and the reduction of subtle understandings to generalization and stereotypes. And Carlos and Tatiana yesterday advised us that it was wise to avoid language which reinforces stereotypes. Okay. Now then, okay, I'm going to get on to now the study that I want to share with you that we conducted with our colleagues in France. So how can we facilitate intercultural sensitivity? So one powerful way we found is helping language teachers to become more conscious of how they think of intercultural relations and how far they incorporate these ideas into their classroom practice, okay? Right? So this is the project we carried out with Universidad de los Andes and Université Sorbonne Nouvelle in between 2015 and 2017. And we worked with teachers or in-service teachers of foreign and second language. And we wanted to work on a comparative proposal. So the Colombian, you can see the Colombian people, Colombian participants, and the French participants. As I say, Paula Gamboa Diaz is Colombian, but she works in Paris 3, Paris Sorbonne Nouvelle. The research questions we had were, what type of situations involving alterity do language teachers and students come up against? What type of discourse do they adopt? And especially what factors influence the change of positioning of the participants in these kinds of situations? Okay, Beatriz. So what did we do? We wanted to incorporate, as I said, the intercultural dimension explicitly within the professional development of teachers of foreign languages in Colombia and France. Very often we find that people say, yes, 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 but it's not an explicit part of the program. So we wanted to actually make it explicit. And so the methodology we adopted was classroom action research, participant observation, diaries, video and audio recordings, semi-structured interviews, focus groups, questionnaires, pre and post. Okay. Now, what did we ask them to do? Very briefly, they watched the film Gran Torino. This is a film by quite an old film now, 2008. It has Clint Eastwood in it. And the reason we asked them to watch this was to identify individual differences in interpersonal interaction and excuse me, individual and group stereotypes. For example, the main character in the film is originally from Poland, but he's into anti-immigrant, and yet his best friend is an Italian immigrant. So we wanted them to discuss the understandings of personal, social, and historical reasons which influence these types of behavioral change. Okay. And this is just the description of the film. This disgruntled Korean War veteran sets out to reform his neighbor, a Hmong teenager who tried to steal his prized possession, 1972 Gran Torino. So that's where the name comes from. Yeah. Okay, so what did we ask them to do? We asked them to design a didactic sequence involving the learning and foreign language learning, in integrating a cultural dimension in order to develop intercultural understanding in their own teaching context. This was very important because we wanted them not just to understand in the teaching context, for example, in Los Andes, Universidad de Los Andes, but how would they do it in their own teaching context? And then they were asked to reflect how the implementation went and how their students reacted, okay? Okay, so these are some of the ways that, some of the topics that they chose. So you can see some of them quite simple at primary school level, different ways of celebrating birthdays. Another one, which is very important in Colombia, living in the country and living in the town, because these are so different, as you heard yesterday with Carlos in their presentation. Ways of promoting peace, intercultural understanding, citizenship, in conflict resolution among students at school. And another one, gender stereotypes, run like a girl. And then exteriorizing stereotypes about students in the US and comparing with the narratives, both of a student from the US and their own experiences. So they were able to look at different ways, not just, Colombian and a foreign nation. They were looking at within their own country, gender, town and country, etc., etc. Yeah. Okay, so what did they note? We were quite surprised to find that some of the students said they couldn't possibly implement their didactic sequences because it was not seen as relevant by the authorities in the institutions where they were working. No, you're here to teach English or whatever language, but not to talk about intercultural understanding. The researchers noted that the teachers focused mainly on foreign cultures and Colombian cultures, them and us, but they were later persuaded to see topics from a wider vision that we've noticed in some of the topics that I've just presented there. Okay. And one of the categories that came up, which is not surprising, is the growing consciousness of identity. This teacher says, the main responsibilities I could reflect on are, who am I when I speak this language? How am I when I speak this language? How do I feel when I teach this language? So notice that her identity is as a language speaker, but also as a language teacher. And then another one talks about her experience of living abroad. And she says, through these the activities, I reflected on my own process as a bilingual speaker and how my identities changed after the experience of living abroad. Okay. Another category was their deepening understanding of intercultural sensitivity, which was something we were promoting very strongly through the teachers. And this teacher said about his own students, my students emphasized in words like difference, other, accept, understand, adapt, learn, grow up. So notice a little bit from the ethnocentric to the ethno-relative idea. They recognize that each human being is unique and that our nationality or the groups we belong to don't define us. So this was quite a profound understanding from this student. Now, I'm just going to share you with you. I'm looking at the time, but I think we still have a few more minutes, I understand. So this is one student who's now graduated, and he's allowed me to use his name. He worked on a project called, or didactic sequence called, Discovering Our Prejudices. He worked in an institute, a language institute, and he asked the participants to work with a worksheet to identify a group they did not belong to. So he gave them some examples: Venezuelan, as you know, in Colombia, there are a lot of Venezuelan immigrants at the moment, indigenous people, foreigners, woman, man, transgender, etc. So it wasn't just nationalities. Then after identifying this group that they did not belong to, they had to reflect and discuss whether they had stereotypes about this group and whether these had influenced their behavior towards these individuals. Okay. So how do they feel? Well, they said it was useful. They were able to reflect on their own stereotypes, and they felt this was the first step. But as I said before, some of them really struggled with how they could actually implement these ideas in their classes. And they asked about mechanisms they could use to measure intercultural awareness. Okay. And this is what Jaime Duran said. It was as when he reflected on the whole incident, or the whole experience. He said, my training as an English teacher has been flooded with teaching techniques and influenced by the theories of Stephen Krashen. However, a new world was presented to me when the course of interculturality was recently introduced. I conclude that I have been exposed to the psycholinguistic debates of the field, but not to the socio-cultural approaches. Okay. And then he came to the realization, which I think is very true: a successful English teacher needs much more than technical abilities. Teachers have the ability to reinforce and perpetuate hatred, or to stimulate diversity and inspire students to create a better world. Right. So now I'm just going, I know I don't have too much time, but I'm just going to take you through very quickly. In Colombia, the Ministry of Education has a program for citizenship, which talks about peaceful coexistence, democratic participation and responsibility, plurality, identity, and valuing a difference. So you can see the citizenship education has connections with what we've been talking about, intercultural understanding. And the ministry has a national test for citizenship competences. Okay. And UNESCO also talks about their agenda to ensure that all learners are provided with knowledge, skills, promotes human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace, non-violence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and of cultural contribution to sustainable development. So notice again the discourse that we have to do with cultural diversity and gender equality, culture of peace here, UNESCO. And they talk about global citizenship, a sense of belonging to the global community, sense of humanity, solidarity, collective identity, and collective responsibility. And the Ministry of Education in Colombia have, in fact, recently taken this idea, some of these ideas on board. Beatriz? So this is a very recent pronouncement by the Ministry of Education in Colombia. So the program, which is called Colombia Bilingüe, Bilingual Colombia, they say now we must look at multilingualism. The program of multilingualism focused on the construction of competences of global citizenship, which recognize their identity and culture. We might want to say identities and cultures, but anyway, the idea of the ministry is now to move forward to the idea of multilingualism and global citizenship, okay? Okay, this is the MOOC I was talking about. One of our commitments in the project we carried out with Paris was to construct a MOOC, and it was constructed by Coursera and Universidad de los Andes, understanding intercultural dimensions in everyday life. We are very happy with it because it's a multilingual MOOC. It's in 4 languages: Spanish, French, English, more recently in Portuguese, because Brazil was interested. Some researchers and teachers and students in Brazil were interested in this. And we've had a total number of learners, over 7,000 since its launch in 2019. If you're interested, you can log on to the website. It's free unless you need a certificate. So you can have a look and see what you think, okay? Okay, these are the 4 modules. La interculturalidad a través de la diversidad, el lenguaje, situación de alterité y dimensions interculturelles, language, hybridity in third spaces, and mobilité interculturelle et mise en œuvre de soi. So notice we are all speaking in different languages there. Okay. And this is these are the 4 of us with our in our different modules. Okay, next one. Okay, and just some final thoughts. Okay, so I know tomorrow you're going on Friday you're going to have a plenary from Manuela about the importance of well, she's going to talk about relations to local and global studies in the global South, and Scott Kangas and et al. Have talked about the importance of sharing local studies globally, which can lead to better theorizing and action for more social justice and equality. I think we would agree there's a need to combat essentializing tendencies, polar opposites and dichotomies, and the importance of the notions of hybridity and crossing. So Dooley talks about crossing the intercultural borders into third space cultures, implications for teacher education. Okay, and so I'm going to end with perhaps a very meaningful quote. I'm going to read it in Spanish. It's from an indigenous academic in Universidad de Antioquia in Medellín. And this is what he says. No basta reconocer al otro en aquella dimensión que nos interesa o parece correcta o urgente o similar. En tal caso, estaríamos viendo y proyectando a nosotros mismos en el otro, pero no estamos mirando el otro como alguien diferente. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, for this very insightful and very engaging talk. And I'm sure there will be a few questions now. We have like 7 minutes. We can, I mean, the next session is at 10 past. So I think we can have in 10, 12 minutes. So if you can write on the chat that you have a question, I think that will be the easiest way for me to see who is interested in asking questions. Because there are almost 70 of us here, and I have to move from screen to screen to see who wants to ask a question. Sorry, I think I saw a hand, but I cannot see it any longer. So, or if you want to unmute your microphone and start speaking, in case I miss a hand up. Okay, right. I will start with a question myself, Anne-Marie. Do you think this MOOC course you were showing just at the end of your presentation of your lecture, do you think that is the first step to move forward into teachers introducing more intercultural aspects in their classrooms, or I guess there are still many things to do to move forward and to get multilingual, fully multicultural?
Well, thank you very much, Maria Jose, for that question. In fact, one of my co-researchers, Isabel Tejada Sanchez, she has worked with the MOOC with some students of hers, and she came to the conclusion after looking at how the students reacted. She said, well, yes, there is evidence, as we found in our study, that the students become more interculturally aware, become more interculturally sensitive. However, she said, and I think this is very true, we cannot predict, well, she didn't carry out a study, and we didn't either, to see how this translates into later practice. So maybe at the time that they finish the MOOC, you know, they've carried out the activities, they've understood what's happening, they've deepened their understanding, but how far this actually transcends into practice of a long period of times is difficult to know. I think from what the reactions we've had have been very positive in general, although I remember somebody in Brazil saying, well, I'm not sure how much our teachers are interested in an online course. They prefer something, you know, more personalized. But of course, nowadays, I think people are coming to grips with online courses and online activities because just of the pandemic. So I'm sorry. There we are. So I would say, yes, it's a first step, but it's not the only step. I think we need to do far more to support teachers, because I think it's very challenging to leave vocabulary and grammar teaching. And I think that it's, you know, teachers would need support, would need sometimes a mentor system in their schools, or a community of understanding or something that would help to promote these ideas. Because for as I tried to show in Colombia, these are still very new ideas. Beatriz found in her study that, you know, there was a long way to go. So yes, definite answer to your question. Yes, I think it's a way forward, but it's not only, it's not the only way. We need more.
So there are some messages congratulating you on the lecture, one from Beatriz herself, but also from some other people. Someone says, thank you very much, inspiring presentation, and thank you, Anne-Marie, and sends you greetings from Barranquilla, right?
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So anyone else would like to ask a question? Some more thank yous on the chat. Okay, I will go on with another question, because you mentioned it in your lecture that in one of the studies you mentioned, you presented, that one of the difficulties teachers found in their practice was that either it was difficult for them to combine grammar and interculturality, or they were almost forbidden, or found some rejection from their own schools, their own institutions, to do things different from teaching grammar and having students pass state exams or official exams, things like that. So have you managed to find the magic solution to this issue, to this problem?
Well, not, as you say, it's a magic solution. No, we haven't got there yet. However, I will tell you something, a recent experience, well, recently, a city in Colombia called Bucaramanga contacted me, and they said, listen, the mayor's office in Bucaramanga wants to work out a local language policy for bilingualism, by which they mean mainly English. So could you help us with this? I said, oh, yes. So this I see as a way forward, because if we're not talking about the ministry, obviously these local policies have to be in line with the ministry documents. But I think that at local level, there are ways of going forward, promoting, for example, intercultural understanding in language teaching, taking into account the local situations. And I know Manuel is going to talk about this probably on Friday. I think this is a way forward. So we don't just have a centralized understanding of or pronouncement. And the other thing is, in the Universidad de Antioquia in Medellin, they are working with, for example, student teachers who are in their practice and their didactic practices before they graduate, and they go into public schools and they are trying to introduce new ideas, and they work in a community of practice with some of these teachers who are working in the public sector. So I think these are all ways that can help to support teachers. I mean, there are some teachers who perhaps think, you know, I've always done it this way and this is the way I'm going to continue. But there are voices for change around, and I think, you know, it's coming, but it's not there quite yet. It's not magic yet. Thank you. Thank you.
We have one question on the chat. When Yang says, the textbook is also full of nationalism and essentialism, which reinforce the stereotypes of both teachers and students. Do you think this should be changed first, or else the training would be in contradiction to the textbook?
Yes, this is a question that often comes up, and it has been, many teachers see this as, yeah, very constraining. You know, the ministry has said, you know, you need to use these textbooks, etc., or the school, the institution says. What the ministry has done recently is to produce textbook in Colombia, English language textbooks in Colombia, which have gone some way to incorporate local understandings. I mean, it's still very much, you know, you know, not really sensitive to local situations, but it's a way forward. It's English please, way to go, things like that. So that this is a step forward from the time when all textbooks were imported. So this is a way, but I would agree with you, yes. The other thing that I think helps teachers is to see the textbooks as, you know, as a basis, but how can teachers use it creatively? So, you know, the famous example, okay, climate changes in England, for example. Now, okay, in Colombia, we don't have this, why not? And so to start from the textbook, but to broaden it out to local understandings, local conditions. And I think that's the way forward. It may be a little bit more difficult, it may take more time, but it is possible. But yes, I would agree indeed.
So, well, she says, thank you. Yes, and Beatriz is saying that time is over. So we'll have to stop here. Thank you, Anne-Marie, very, very much. It has been a very interesting lecture. Your email address has been given to everybody, and it is also in the book of abstracts. So I'm sure some people will be contacting you to ask you a few more questions. Thank you very much. And as I said at the beginning, it has been a pleasure and a privilege to share this session with you as the keynote speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria Jose, and thank you to everybody who listened and who has sent questions, and who and hopefully we will be able to continue our journey forward in these respects. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Maria Jose. Thank you, everybody. Now we're ready to go to the parallel rooms. Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Hola, Alex.
Hola Paola, te voy a te voy a quitar este rol porque para que puedas grabar sin problemas, ¿listo?
Listo, perfecto.
¿Listo?
¿Alguien igual ingresa para apoyar de pronto en otras cosas?
Sí, Jamie va para allá a
Jamie,
ayudarte, ¿listo?
perfecto. Bien. Me avisas cuando pueda
Bueno,
ingresar otra vez.
listo. Ya te estoy dando acá el permiso, Paola, para que puedas grabar. Listo. Ya te puedes ir para la sala. Muchas gracias.
Perfecto.
Para que pongas
Gracias.
a grabar, ¿listo?